Fluent Fables. Learn English with story.
Hello, and welcome to Fluent Fables, the podcast where compelling stories and advanced English collide. I'm so glad you're here. If you're a passionate language learner looking to sharpen your listening skills, expand your vocabulary, and immerse yourself in a captivating narrative, you've come to the right place. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends who are also on their English learning journey. Your support helps us create more great content like this. Now, get comfortable and let's get lost in the icy wilderness. I encourage you to listen closely to the end and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let the story begin. The cacophony of the engines had been a constant companion, a dull, reassuring roar that signified the delicate balance between man and the untamed wilderness of the polar reaches. Now, only the wind howled, a mournful, relentless wail that seemed to carry the very essence of the sub-zero air. Elias Vance, a man whose life had been a meticulous study of atmospheric dynamics, awoke to this profound silence, his head throbbing with a pain that felt as if his skull had been split open. The wreckage of the Orion research vessel lay around him, a grotesque, twisted sculpture of steel and glass buried in a fresh blanket of snow. He found Anya, the expedition's geologist, first. She was pinned beneath a section of the collapsed cockpit, her face pale, a thin trickle of blood staining her temple. Her eyes fluttered open, a weak attempt at a smile barely touching her lips. "Elias," she croaked, her voice barely audible over the wind. The transponder?" He didn't need her to finish the sentence. He knew. The transponder was gone, shattered into a million useless pieces. They were alone, utterly, impossibly alone. The realization settled over him like a physical weight, a visceral dread that had nothing to do with the freezing cold and everything to do with the absolute isolation. Elias, a man of theory and calculation, found himself in a world that defied both. Their mission had been a 3-month study of glacial melt patterns, a relatively safe, methodical endeavor. The freak storm that had brought them down had been a statistical improbability, a meteorological anomaly that his own models had predicted with a 0.01% chance of occurrence. His mind, a finely tuned instrument of logic, was struggling to obfuscate the reality. He was a scientist, not a survivalist. His expertise was in data, not the brutal, unforgiving terrain that now stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. They had enough supplies for a few days, a couple of weeks at most, if they were careful. But rescue was a distant, almost mythological concept. Anya, with her practical wisdom, became his anchor. She managed to free herself from the wreckage, albeit with a deep gash on her leg. Her face, a roadmap of frost nip and pain, was a mask of stoic resolve. "We need to move," she said, her voice stronger now. "The storm will pass. We need to find shelter before the second wave hits." Elias stared at the endless white expanse, the jagged peaks of the mountains a stark, menacing silhouette against the gray sky. "Move where, Anya? We have no idea where we are. Our primary objective was a few degrees off the current position, and the secondary even further." She pointed to the sky to a faint, almost imperceptible shift in the clouds. "The wind, it's coming from the east. It's a predictable pattern of a katabatic wind." She explained how a cold wind flows downhill, carrying the very air that could determine their fate. "It's flowing from a higher elevation towards the sea. We follow it, we find water. We find water, we find a chance." Elias, the man of theoretical models, was confronted with a simple, brutal truth. The Earth itself was a better guide than his shattered technology. His scientific arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a raw, unadorned human being. As they gathered what they could, a handful of ration packs, a frayed thermal blanket, and a useless, broken compass, Elias felt a profound shift in his understanding of the world. Survival was not about data points and probabilities. It was about the primal, unyielding will to live. The journey began as a slow, painful crawl. Anya, despite her injury, moved with a grace that came from years of traversing treacherous landscapes. Elias, on the other hand, stumbled and fell, his city-worn boots ill-equipped for the icy terrain. He watched as the sun, a pale, distant disk, finally dipped below the horizon, plunging them into a darkness so complete it felt as if they had fallen off the edge of the world, the cold intensified, a sharp, biting presence that promised a swift, merciless end. Their first night was spent huddled beneath a makeshift shelter of broken fuselage, the faint, shivering warmth of the thermal blanket, their only defense against the inevitable. Days turned into a bleak, relentless blur. Elias, once a man of routine and order, found his life reduced to a primal cycle of hunger, cold, and a constant, gnawing fear. Anya's injury had worsened. The gash in her leg, now a deep, infected wound, had slowed the rapid progress to a painful crawl. Her fever was a constant source of anxiety, her incoherent ramblings a terrifying soundtrack to their slow, agonizing march. It was on the 10th day that they saw it, a single, solitary column of stone, a stark, anachronistic structure rising from the snow-covered earth like a forgotten god. It was a lighthouse, not a modern, automated beacon, but an antediluvian structure of crude stone and mortar. Its very presence an impossibility in this desolate, unmapped expanse. The sight was a jolt to their weary minds, a beacon of irrational hope in a world of rational despair. This is impossible, Elias stammered, his mind unable to process the contradiction. There's no record of a settlement here. This part of the continent is completely uncharted. Then someone beat us to it, Anya muttered, a feverish light in her eyes. Someone was here before. The closer they got, the more surreal the scene became. The lighthouse was intact, its glass dome surprisingly pristine. The door, a heavy slab of wood bound in iron, was sealed shut, frozen solid by a century of ice. Anya, in a moment of delirium, insisted she could hear a faint, rhythmic humming from within. Elias, his mind clouded by fatigue, almost believed her. They spent the night huddled against the base of the lighthouse, the stone offering a slight respite from the biting wind. The next morning, Elias, armed with a shard of metal from the Orion wreckage, began to chip away at the ice surrounding the door. Hours passed, his movements a repetitive, hypnotic rhythm against the silence. Finally, the door creaked open, groaning in protest. The inside was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from the open door, illuminating a circular room filled with ancient, rusted equipment. The air was thick and stagnant, smelling of decay and salt. In the center of the room, a rusted steel desk held a single, leather-bound journal. Elias's fingers, trembling with anticipation and cold, brushed the cover. The journal was brittle with age, its pages filled with a delicate, handwritten script. The author, a man named Kalen Thorne, had documented his journey here 100 years ago, a journey that seemed to mirror their own. He spoke of a maelstrom, of a storm that brought his ship down, of a desperate journey across the frozen wastes, and of the profound loneliness that had begun to enervate him. But the most shocking discovery was a name, scrawled in the margins of the final entry. The Glacial Echo is not a place, it's a consciousness. The journal ended there, its final pages blank. The lighthouse, this impossible structure, was Kalen's last testament, a solitary monument to a lost mind. The plot twist was a subtle one, a whisper from the past. The lighthouse wasn't a sign of rescue or even a previous expedition. It was a warning. Kalen had not been rescued. He had died here, and whatever he had discovered had consumed his mind before his body. The humming Anya had heard wasn't from the machinery. It was the wind, a sound she had interpreted through a feverish, damaged mind. And the name, Kalen Thorne. Eris was a different man, but the name was too close to his own. A chilling, almost cosmic coincidence. Anya's condition had deteriorated drastically. Her fever raged, her body a battlefield of internal struggle. The discovery of the journal, while fascinating, had done little to improve their immediate situation. They were still trapped, still alone, and now they had a new intangible enemy, the Glacial Echo. Elias, with a new urgency, began to explore the lighthouse. The spiral staircase, its metal rungs corroded with rust, led to the top. The dome was not a simple glass enclosure, but a complex array of what looked like crystalline filaments, a strange, beautiful network that pulsed with a faint, low light. The humming sound, now very real, emanated from the dome itself. He touched the glass, and a sharp, electric jolt shot through his body, not of pain, but of pure, unadulterated information. Images, thoughts, emotions flooded his mind, a torrent of sensory input that was both overwhelming and strangely enlightening. He saw Kaylin, the journal's author, alone in the lighthouse, his mind slowly unraveling as he communicated with the planet. He saw the vast, incomprehensible mind of the ice, a living, breathing entity that saw humans as a temporary, fleeting anomaly. The Glacial Echo wasn't a threat. It was a conversation, a dialogue between a cosmic being and a fragile mortal mind. Kaylin had not gone insane. He had simply been unable to process the sheer volume of information. The lighthouse, built by his own hands, was a desperate attempt to create a conduit, a way to understand the echo without being consumed by it. But it was a flawed design, a crude instrument. Another plot twist: Anya's fever was not from an infection. It was a primitive form of communion with the echo. Her mind, already open to the Earth's vibrations as a geologist, was trying to process the planet's immense consciousness. The fever was her body's way of fighting back, of resisting the torrent of information. The full weight of the situation landed on Elias. He was the one who could understand. He was the one with the scientific mind, the one whose life had been dedicated to understanding complex systems. He had to finish Kaylin's work. He had to turn this crude lighthouse into a functioning communicator, a machine that could translate the echo's voice into a language they could understand. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was tasked with an esoteric mission, a cosmic responsibility. The next few days were a desperate race against time. Elias, fueled by Anya's deteriorating health and a newfound sense of purpose, worked tirelessly. He used what was left of his tools from the Orion wreckage, a few wires, a piece of the circuit board, and his own scientific knowledge. He started to rewire the lighthouse's crystalline dome, turning it from a simple conduit into a complex translator. He could feel the echo's presence, a vast, gentle mind that was simply trying to communicate. He learned that the storm that had brought them down was not an attack. It was a reaction. A defense mechanism against what the echo perceived as a violation, the deep drilling and seismic testing of the Orion. The echo wasn't malicious. It was just trying to protect itself. He also discovered a message, a final, cryptic note from Kaylin Thorne, hidden in the journal's final blank pages. "There is a way to leave. The echo can guide you. But the price is, you must give something back. Not a machine, not a piece of technology, something more profound." The message was an enigmatic riddle, a final test from a man who had faced the same choice. The machine was complete. Elias, his hands shaking with exhaustion, and a deep gnawing fear powered the lighthouse. The humming intensified, the crystals in the dome glowing with a bright, ethereal light. Anya, now fully delirious, lay beside him, her fever-addled mind finally at peace as the echo's voice was filtered and translated. "It's working," he whispered to her, though he knew she couldn't hear him. He could now perceive the echo's thoughts not as a torrent, but as a gentle, guiding presence. He could feel the vast, frozen landscape as if it were a single, living organism. The echo showed him the way out, a thin, almost imperceptible fissure in the ice that led to a safe passage, a shortcut to a distant, uncharted coast where a human settlement existed. But it came with a condition, the price Kaylin had mentioned. The echo needed a gift. It wasn't a physical object. It was a piece of him, a part of his mind. The echo wanted to experience the human concept of empathy, the intricate, beautiful, and often painful web of human emotion. Kaylin had given the echo his own empathy, his deep love for his family, and in doing so, had left a part of his humanity behind, leaving him a hollow, empty shell. This was the final, devastating plot twist. There was no escaping with his mind intact. To save Anya and himself, to earn their passage out of this frozen hell, he had to make the same sacrifice. He had to give up his ability to feel for others, to connect with them on a deep, emotional level. He would be a man of pure logic again, but this time by choice. He looked at Anya, her pale face serene in the lighthouse's glow, her life hanging in the balance. The choice was agonizing. To lose his empathy was to lose the very thing that made him human, the very thing that made him care for Anya, that had driven him to save her. It was an acrimonious choice, a battle between his intellect and his emotions, a struggle he had been fighting since the crash. In the end, his love for Anya won. He reached out and touched the glowing crystal of the dome. A feeling, a profound sense of loss, shot through his body. He felt the warmth, the love, the compassion he had for Anya, for his family, for all of humanity, being pulled from him, absorbed by the vast, consuming mind of the echo. When he pulled his hand away, the world was different. The emotional colors were gone, replaced by a cold, gray logic. He saw Anya not as a woman he cared for, but as a biological entity that needed a specific set of parameters to survive. He saw the path out, not as a journey to freedom, but as a series of calculated steps to a predetermined outcome. He had become Kalen Thorne, a man of pure logic, an echo of a person. He packed Anya onto a makeshift sledge and began the long journey towards the coast. His movements precise, his mind calm, his heart empty. The Glacial Echo, his newfound companion, guided him silently, a benevolent, all-knowing presence that had taken a piece of him to understand what it meant to be human. The story ends not with a victory, but with a profound and somber victory. He had saved Anya. He had completed his mission, but in doing so, he had lost the very essence of himself. His survival was a triumph of the will, but a tragedy of the soul. The silence was his new normal, a profound and eternal stillness, broken only by the cold, logical rhythm of his journey home. This story is full of vocabulary and a grammatical structure that are perfect for a C1, C2 learner. Let's break down the meanings and see how they were used. Advanced vocabulary. Cacophony. Definition. A harsh, discordant mixture of sounds. Example. The cacophony of the city was replaced by the serene sounds of nature. Visceral dread. Definition. An instinctive, deep-seated fear. The feeling is often physical, felt in your gut. Example. The sudden earthquake filled him with a visceral dread he had never experienced before. Obfuscate. Definition. To make something unclear, difficult to understand, or deliberately confusing. Example. The lawyer tried to obfuscate the truth with a series of complicated arguments. Katabatic wind. Definition. A wind that carries high-density air from a higher elevation down a slope under the force of gravity. Example. The sudden bone-chilling katabatic wind signaled a drop in temperature. Arrogance. Definition. An insulting or overbearing show of superiority. Example. His scientific arrogance prevented him from listening to the indigenous people's ancient wisdom. Antediluvian. Definition. Literally, before the flood, referring to the biblical story, used to describe something very old, old-fashioned, or primitive. Example. The cave painting was a truly antediluvian piece of art. Maelstrom. Definition. A powerful, chaotic whirlpool or a state of confused motion or violent turmoil. Example. He was caught in a maelstrom of emotions after losing his job and home in the same week. Enervate. Definition. To cause someone to feel drained of energy or vitality, to weaken. Example. The relentless heat of the desert began to enervate the hikers. Esoteric. Definition. Intended for, or likely to be understood, by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge. Example. He loved discussing esoteric topics like quantum mechanics and philosophy. Acrimonious. Definition. Typically of a debate or a relationship, angry and bitter. Example. The team split after an acrimonious argument about who should be the leader. Advanced grammatical structure. Had they known? Structure. This is an inverted conditional sentence. It's an advanced way of creating a past unreal conditional without using the word if. Original standard form. If they had known. Explanation. By inverting the subject and the auxiliary verb had, you create a more formal and literary tone. The meaning is the same as the standard if clause. It describes a hypothetical situation in the past that did not happen. Example, had I studied harder, I would have passed the exam. Meaning, if I had studied harder, I would have passed the exam. And that concludes our journey into the Glacial Echo. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into survival, morality, and the profound mysteries of the natural world. What did you think of the story? Which characters' choices resonated with you the most? Or what did you make of that final plot twist? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing your insights and feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Fluent Fables for more stories designed to elevate your English. You can also explore our other videos to continue your learning adventure. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep your curiosity alive.